November 24th, 1991. Garden Lodge, Kensington, London. In the master bedroom of the Victorian mansion, Freddie Mercury closed his eyes to life. Around his bed stood the people who loved him most: his partner Jim Hutton, his personal assistant, his doctor, and Mary Austin. Mary held his hand as he died. For 21 years, in one way or another, she had never let go of his hand. Later that day, devastated and exhausted, Mary had to do something Freddie had asked of her. Something nobody else could know about. She took Freddie's ashes, or at least, she's never confirmed she took them, but everyone believes she did. And she buried them somewhere, a place only she knows. To this day, more than 30 years later, Mary Austin has never revealed where Freddie Mercury is buried. She keeps his secret, as she always did. As she promised, she always would. The world knew Freddie Mercury as rock's most flamboyant showman, as Queen's fearless frontman, as a man who lived openly and loudly. But the most important relationship in his life was quiet, private, unconventional, and lasted until his final breath. This is the story of Freddie Mercury and Mary Austin, a love story unlike any other, a romance that became something deeper than romance, a bond that survived everything: heartbreak, fame, other lovers, illness, death itself. Welcome to Story Factory. I'm here to take you back through the untold stories behind the legends we thought we knew, the relationships that shaped our icons, the love that doesn't fit into simple categories. Today, we're opening the story of Mary Austin, the woman Freddie Mercury called the love of my life, even though their romance ended decades before he died. This isn't a conventional love story. It's better than that. It's the story of two souls who found each other when they had nothing, who loved each other beyond the definitions of love, and who proved that sometimes the deepest connections transcend romance entirely. Let's go back to the beginning. 1969. London Kensington Market, a warren of small shops selling vintage clothes, antiques, records, and jewelry. It was the heart of London's counterculture scene: hippies, artists, musicians, people searching for something different. In one of those shops, a 19-year-old girl named Mary Austin worked behind the counter. She had long dark hair, gentle brown eyes, and a quiet presence that made customers feel comfortable. Mary came from a working-class family in Fulham. Her parents were deaf, and she'd grown up translating for them, navigating a world they couldn't fully hear. It made her observant, careful, attuned to what people didn't say as much as what they did. Mary wasn't looking for adventure. She just wanted to make a living, maybe save enough money to get her own flat someday. She wasn't impressed by rock stars or fame. She'd seen enough of London's scene to know that glamour was usually just a mask for insecurity. Then one day, a young man walked into her shop. He was 23, skinny, with long dark hair and clothes that were colorful, eccentric, attention-grabbing. He moved through the shop like he owned it, touching fabrics, holding up jewelry to the light, talking constantly in a rapid, excited way. His name was Freddie Bulsara, though he'd soon change it to Freddie Mercury. He ran a clothing stall a few shops down and was always looking for interesting pieces to sell. But he lingered in Mary's shop longer than necessary, kept coming back, finding excuses to talk to her. Mary was wary at first. Freddie was so flamboyant, so theatrical. She thought he was probably gay. Not that it mattered to her, but she didn't see how a relationship could work. Still, there was something about him. Behind the theatrical persona, she sensed someone genuine, someone lonely, someone searching. Freddie, for his part, was captivated. Mary was calm where he was chaotic. She was grounded where he was always reaching for more. She listened where others just waited to talk. And she didn't seem impressed by his performances, which paradoxically made him want to impress her more. One day, he asked her out. Mary said yes, half expecting nothing to come of it. They went to a movie, then dinner at a cheap restaurant, then a walk through Hyde Park. Freddie talked constantly about music, about his dreams of stardom, about his frustrations with his current band. Mary listened, asked questions, made him laugh. By the end of the night, something had shifted. Freddie realized Mary saw him, not Freddie the performer, not the persona, but the person underneath, scared, ambitious, insecure, brilliant. And Mary realized Freddie was genuine. Despite the costumes and the theatrical gestures, he was honest in a way most people weren't. He didn't hide his emotions. He felt everything intensely and wasn't ashamed of it. They started dating, and almost immediately they moved in together. This wasn't unusual in 1970. Young people in London were rejecting traditional relationship timelines, but for Freddie and Mary it was also practical. Neither had much money. Freddie was still struggling, playing small gigs with various bands, working odd jobs. Mary was making minimum wage at the shop. Together they could afford a tiny flat in Kensington. That flat, barely bigger than a closet with a shared bathroom down the hall, a hot plate for cooking, became their world. They furnished it with things from the market, a mattress on the floor, mismatched furniture, posters on the walls. It was shabby, cramped, but it was theirs. Those early years were the happiest of Freddie's life, or at least, he'd later say they were the purest, the most real. He hadn't become Freddie Mercury yet. He was still figuring out who he wanted to be, and Mary loved him through all of it. She worked during the day while Freddie rehearsed with his bands, recorded demos, hustled for gigs. She'd come home exhausted, and he'd attempted to, cook dinner, usually disastrously, because Freddie couldn't cook to save his life. They'd eat whatever he'd burned, laughing, then lie on their mattress listening to records until they fell asleep. Money was so tight they counted pennies. Mary later recalled that for Christmas one year, Freddie's gift to her was a single fox fur coat he'd found at the market. He'd saved for weeks to buy it. She wore it everywhere, even though it was too big and smelled slightly of mothballs, because it represented everything. His love, his effort, their shared struggle. In 1970, Freddie joined a band called Smile, which would soon become Queen. Suddenly, he had a real shot at success. Brian May and Roger Taylor saw his talent. They believed in him, and Freddie threw himself into Queen with everything he had. Mary supported him unconditionally. She believed in his talent before anyone else did. When Queen played their early gigs to tiny audiences, Mary was always there, standing in the crowd, applauding. When Freddie came home discouraged after a bad rehearsal or a rejection from a record label, Mary reassured him, "You're brilliant. They just don't see it yet." As Queen started to gain traction, Freddie asked Mary to marry him. He didn't have a ring. He couldn't afford one. But he got down on one knee in their tiny flat and said, "Will you marry me? When we make it, when I can afford to do it properly. Will you be my wife?" Mary said yes. They never set a date. As Queen's career took off, there was always a reason to wait. One more album. One more tour. Let's wait until we can afford the wedding Mary deserves. But they considered themselves engaged. Freddie introduced Mary as his fiancée. They talked about their future, children, a proper house, stability. By the mid-1970s, Queen had made it. Killer Queen was a hit. Bohemian Rhapsody was about to change everything. Freddie could now afford anything he wanted. He bought Mary gifts, jewelry, clothes, anything that caught his eye. He moved them out of that tiny flat into a bigger place. But something was changing. Mary felt it before Freddie acknowledged it. Freddie was staying out later after shows, disappearing for days on tour, growing distant even when they were together. He was drinking more, experimenting with drugs, embracing the excesses that came with fame. Mary knew the music industry was wild. She accepted that Freddie's life on the road would be different from their quiet life in London. But this felt like something more. like Freddie was running from something, or toward something. Then one night, Freddie came home and asked to talk. They sat in their living room, so much nicer now than that first flat, but feeling just as small in this moment. Freddie was shaking. Mary had never seen him scared like this. "I think I'm bisexual," he said finally. Mary felt her heart break and her world shift simultaneously. Part of her had suspected. Part of her had hoped she was wrong. But mostly she felt sad. For Freddie, who looked terrified, and for herself, because she knew what this meant. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. Freddie nodded. Then more honestly, I think I'm gay. I've been trying to figure it out. I love you, Mary. I do. But I'm attracted to men, and I can't keep lying about it." They both cried. Not because Mary was angry. She wasn't. She understood this wasn't a choice Freddie was making. It was truth he was finally admitting. But they mourned what they were losing. The future they'd imagined, the marriage, the children, the simple life they'd planned. "What happens now?" Mary asked. "I don't know," Freddie said. "But I can't lose you. You're the most important person in my life. That doesn't change." They tried to maintain the romantic relationship for a while, but it was unsustainable. Eventually, they acknowledged the truth. They needed to separate as partners. Freddie bought Mary a flat nearby. Not to get rid of her, but to take care of her, to make sure she was comfortable. He made sure she never had to worry about money. And they stayed in each other's lives, seeing each other almost daily. The world didn't understand. Freddie's bandmates didn't understand. Why would you break up but still be inseparable? Why would Freddie buy his ex-girlfriend a flat and continue to support her financially and emotionally? But Freddie and Mary understood. Their relationship had transcended the categories. They weren't lovers anymore, but they were something deeper, soulmates. "All my lovers asked me why they couldn't replace Mary," Freddie would later say in interviews. "But the only friend I've got is Mary, and I don't want anybody else. To me, she was my common-law wife. To me, it was a marriage. We believe in each other. That's enough for me." Through the late 1970s and 1980s, as Freddie's life grew more complicated, as he embraced his sexuality publicly, had relationships with men, dealt with the pressures of fame, Mary remained his constant. He called her almost every day, no matter where he was in the world. Tours in America, recording sessions in Munich, he'd find a phone and call Mary, sometimes just to hear her voice, sometimes to talk through decisions, sometimes to complain about his latest boyfriend. Mary became the keeper of Freddie's truest self. With her, he didn't have to perform. He could be vulnerable, insecure, silly. He could admit he was tired of fame, scared of aging, worried he'd never find lasting love. And Mary listened. She gave advice when asked. She offered comfort when needed. She never judged. In 1985, Freddie met Jim Hutton, an Irish hairdresser. It was different from Freddie's previous relationships, calmer, more stable. Jim loved Freddie for who he was, not for the fame. They moved in together at Garden Lodge, Freddie's mansion in Kensington. Some might expect Mary to feel threatened or jealous, but she didn't. She liked Jim. She could see he genuinely cared for Freddie, and Jim, to his credit, understood Mary's importance. He never tried to push her out or compete with her. The three of them formed an unusual but functional family: Freddie, Jim, and Mary. Jim was Freddie's partner, sharing his daily life. Mary was Freddie's soulmate, holding his deepest truths. Jim later said, "Mary was his family. I understood that. I never tried to come between them because I knew I couldn't. And I didn't want to." In 1987, Freddie was diagnosed HIV positive. He told Mary immediately. She was one of the first to know before most of his bandmates, before almost anyone. "I'm scared," he told her. "I know," she said, "but you're not alone." As AIDS progressed to full-blown illness in the early 1990s, Mary became even more crucial. She helped coordinate his medical care. She visited constantly. She was there during the worst moments, the treatments, the declining health, the fear. Jim Hutton was Freddie's primary caregiver, living with him daily, helping him with the physical necessities. But Mary was his emotional anchor, the person he turned to when he needed to talk about death, about legacy, about what would happen after. Freddie made his will. He left the bulk of his estate to Mary Austin. Garden Lodge, the mansion he'd bought with Queen's success, and 50% of his future earnings from Queen's music. He left portions to his parents, his sister, his staff, and Jim, but Mary got the most. "You would have been my wife, and it would have been yours anyway," he told her. Mary protested. It was too much. Jim should get more. Freddie's family should get more. But Freddie was firm. "I've made my decision. You're my family. You've been my family for 20 years. Everything I have, I want you to have." In his final days, as November 1991 crept forward, Freddie grew weaker. He could barely walk. His vision was failing. Pain racked his body, but he fought to stay conscious, to have a few more days. Mary was there constantly. She'd sit by his bed, hold his hand, talk to him about memories, their tiny flat in Kensington, the fox fur coat, the early Queen gigs, the laughter, the struggle, the love. On November 24th, Freddie slipped into unconsciousness. Mary held his hand. Jim stood nearby. The doctor watched, and quietly, peacefully, Freddie Mercury died. Mary organized the Zoroastrian funeral, respecting Freddie's Parsi heritage, even though he'd largely abandoned those traditions during his life. Then came the reading of the will, and Mary inherited everything Freddie had promised. Garden Lodge became hers, the place filled with Freddie's art, his antiques, his memories. She lives there still, more than 30 years later, surrounded by ghosts and love. And Freddie's ashes. According to most accounts, Mary took them. She's never confirmed or denied it. But everyone believes she knows where Freddie is buried, and she's never told a soul. Not Freddie's parents before they died. Not his sister. Not Jim Hutton before he died in 2010. Not Brian May or Roger Taylor. Not journalists who've begged her for the information. Nobody. "He wanted it private," she said, "and I'll respect that forever." It's the final act of love, keeping his secret, protecting him even in death. People have criticized Mary over the years. Some say she should reveal Freddie's burial location so fans could pay respects. Some say she got too much of his estate. Some question why she stayed at Garden Lodge all these years instead of moving on. But Mary has never explained herself. She doesn't owe anyone explanations. She made promises to Freddie, to protect him, to love him, to be his family, and she's kept every promise. Maybe you remember hearing "Love of My Life," the Queen ballad Freddie wrote. He never explicitly confirmed it, but everyone who knew them believed he wrote it for Mary. The lyrics, "Love of my life, you've hurt me. You've broken my heart and now you leave me," capture the bittersweet reality of their relationship. Pain and love intertwined inseparably. Freddie and Mary's story teaches us that love doesn't fit into neat categories, that you can love someone romantically, lose that romance, and still love them more deeply than anyone else. That soulmates aren't always lovers. That family isn't always blood. Their relationship was unconventional, but it was real, more real perhaps than many traditional marriages, because it was chosen again and again, day after day, for 21 years. Not out of obligation or societal expectation, but out of genuine connection. Rest in peace, Freddie Mercury. You found your soulmate in Mary Austin, even if the world struggled to understand what that meant. You loved her beyond definition, and she loved you the same way, fiercely, loyally, eternally. And to Mary Austin, still living quietly in Garden Lodge, still keeping Freddie's secrets, thank you. For loving him when he had nothing, for staying when he became everything, for protecting him when he needed it most. You were the love of his life, and he was the love of yours. Before we close, a brief note. This story is based on publicly available information, interviews with Mary Austin, Jim Hutton's memoir, Queen Band members' accounts, and biographical sources. Some conversations have been dramatized to bring their story to life, but the heart of this relationship, the love, the loyalty, the unconventional bond, is real and well documented. If this story moved you, if it made you see love differently, consider subscribing to Story Factory. We're here to tell the untold stories, the relationships that don't fit simple narratives, the love that transcends categories. Because every legend has a love story, and Mary and Freddie's deserves to be remembered. Thank you for listening. Until next time.